We begin today in Daf Chav Daled Amud Aleph. We're about, this is like 12 lines into the Yomud here, where it says, Haravi b'kodesh pasal. This is one of the things in the Mishnah where it mentioned the chumris that there are regarding kodesh that's more than truma. So what it said in the Mishnah is that regarding kodesh, the level of tumah extends all the way to a revi l'tumah. Whereas when it comes to truma, it only goes to shlishi. There's nothing past shlishi l'tumah. So the Gemara brings a source for this. Tanya, Rabbi Yaisi said, Minayin l'revi b'kodesh pasal. What's the source for this concept that regarding kodesh, the tumah goes until revi? So he answered, V'dinu, this is a kal v'chaymer. If when it comes to a mechusa kippurim, who's a mechusa kippurim? A mechusa kippurim is, for example, a zov that's tamei, and he has to wait 7 days to be clean. Then he goes to the mikveh, but even after he goes to the mikveh, he can't yet eat from kachim. He has to wait till the next day, and the next day he's called a mechusa kippurim, meaning he still didn't bring his carbon. Only after he brings his carbon, then he can eat from kachim. He could eat from truma as soon as he goes to the mikveh, and then that night he could eat from truma. But kachim he has to wait until the next day after he brings a carbon. So Uma mechusa kippurim, when it comes to this individual, which is a mechusa kippurim, shemuter betruma, he's allowed to eat truma after he went to the mikveh the night before. But still, pasal b'kodesh, he's not allowed to eat from kachim until after he brings his carbon. So if so, shlishi, when it comes to the level of tumah, which is a shlishi, shepasal b'truma, which is also a level of tumah that applies to truma, that's pasal by truma, einoi din. So for sure, that this is a tumah that should apply to kachim as well, that einoi din sheyaser revi l'kodesh. So most definitely, this tumah should apply to kachim, and that by kachim we take it a step further, that it should become a revi, that there should be a level of tumah even for revi by kachim. Yeah, doesn't make a difference. But Rashi here addresses the obvious question on the Gemara, that there's something that seems to be wrong with this kal v'chaymer. The Gemara says that when it comes to a shlishi, which is going to be pasal for truma, that it itself is tameh by truma, so for sure when it comes to kachim, we should take it to the next level, that it should become a revi. Says Rashi, why take it to the next level? The kal v'chaymer should go that for sure when it comes to a shlishi l'tumah, that if that tumah applies by truma, for sure that level of tumah, which is shlishi, should apply for kachim. Why take it to the next level of revi? That's the question. Rashi says, this is what the Gemara usually refers to as dayai. Dayai lebam adin li is kinidin. If the source of your kal v'chaymer is from what you find by truma, that it becomes tumah up to the level of shlishi, so that's your source. So if you're learning from there to kachim, so you should say by kachim not more than that it should only be a shlishi l'tumah by kachim. So Rashi says an interesting thing. This is a rule the Gemara says in a few places, that sometimes we do use a kal v'chaymer to actually be mechadish and add even more than what the source has. And over here, this concept that by kachim there's a shlishi l'tumah, as the Gemara is going to bring in a moment, there's a beferish pasuk for that. We don't need a kal v'chaymer for that. That we know already. We know that by kachim the tumah goes to the level of shlishi. If you don't need the kal v'chaymer for that itself, so then you use the kal v'chaymer to take it to the next level, and you don't apply the rule of dayai. Dayai is only applied when you have to define and limit your kal v'chaymer to figure out where it belongs. But if the kal v'chaymer is not useful for the level of shlishi, so then you take this kal v'chaymer to teach you something. This kal v'chaymer is a limud b'teira that's supposed to teach you something. What is it going to teach you? Only revi. The only thing that it could teach you regarding kachim is to extend it a step further, because shlishi we know already. So therefore the rule of dayai does not apply here. That's what Rashi says in the first pshat. Okay, let's continue the Gemara. So here the Gemara is going to go back, like I just said, and bring the actual source regarding kachim for shlishi l'tumah. The level of shlishi l'tumah by kachim, that we don't need a kal v'chaymer for. V'lamadnu shlishi l'kodesh min ha'Torah. The fact that by kodesh the tumah goes to the level of shlishi, that we learn from a pasuk. V'revi b'kal v'chaymer. And then to say that it goes to the next level of revi l'tumah, that we learn from the kal v'chaymer we just said. Shlishi l'kodesh min ha'Torah minayin. From where do we know that by kachim the tumah goes to the level of shlishi? The chsiv, because by kachim the pasuk says va'basar Chagigah b'chol tomei. The basar of a carbon, kachim, that touches anything that's tomei, lo yachol should not be eaten. So when the Torah says b'chol tomei, what level of tomei is that referring to? Mi lo yaskinan. Doesn't that include as well the naga b'sheni? that he touched in something which is sheni l'tumah, which is also included in kol tameh. So Rashi says, how do we know that? How do we know that kol tameh includes sheni l'tumah? So the answer is because we find, because we find in the Torah that it refers to a sheni l'tumah as tameh. Where do we see this? Regarding a sheretz. If a sheretz falls inside a earthenware keli, so then what happens? Let's say this is an earthenware keli that has wine in it, and the sheretz goes inside this earthenware keli. It does not touch the liquid, but it's just in the interior of the keli. The keli itself will become a rishon l'tumah. The liquid that's inside will become a sheni l'tumah, and the Torah refers to that as tameh. Right, as Rashi brings the psukim, kol asher b'toicha yitma, that whatever is inside this earthenware keli, where a sheretz entered into the interior, becomes tameh. That yitma refers not only to the keli itself, which is a rishon l'tumah, it refers to the liquid that's inside, that's a sheni l'tumah. So we see that the Torah refers to a sheni l'tumah with the lashon yitma. So when it says over here, v'abasar Chagigah b'chol tameh, it refers even to this level of tumah, which is mentioned in the Torah as being tameh, b'chol tameh. And what is it? The Torah says that if you have basa from a carbon that touches a sheni l'tumah, you can't eat it. So you clearly see that there's a level of shlishi l'tumah from this pasuk. And then revi kavachaymer, and then we learn out that it goes even one step further to a revi from the kavachaymer hadam mara, as we just said, the kavachaymer that we learn from the Chosek Kippurim. The next thing in the Mishnah it said, "Betrumah im nitmis." It said in the Mishnah regarding trumah.
Yeah, but the pasuk learning it out, that means you're making an eichel be metam another eichel.
No. Good. Yeah, could be metam the kelis. Yeah, that doesn't matter.
I thought we said that a keli can't be metam another keli.
I don't think so. A keli can't be metam another keli. Yeah, right. Ubetrumah im nitmis. It said in the Mishnah regarding trumah that if one hand became tameh, and this is talking about a tumah midrabanan. What kind of a tumah do you have midrabanan? For example, a mashke. There's a certain tumah that Chachamim put onto mashkin. This is an important point for the whole continuation of the sugya here. Any liquid, Chachamim will geyser that it should be a rishon l'tumah, even though the liquids was a sheni l'tumah, a shlishi l'tumah, but liquids is automatically elevated to a rishon l'tumah. What was the reason for this gzeira? Any time for anything, a mashkin is a rishon l'tumah. If a person's hand touches a mashkin, and the mashkin that's on his hand is a rishon l'tumah, and if that hand touches another hand, the mashkin that's on his hand is considered to be a rishon l'tumah. It makes the other hand a sheni l'tumah. Mashkin gets automatically elevated to be a rishon l'tumah, even if the mashkin became tameh from something else, and it should have been a sheni l'tumah. If the mashkin became tameh, once it becomes tameh, it's automatically elevated to a rishon l'tumah. What's the reason for this? Because the chamu or geyser that the mashke, you might confuse this mashke to the mashke that comes directly from a zav or a zava or a nida, and therefore that is a rishon l'tumah. So therefore, they were guys on the mashkin that it should be a rishon l'tumah. So if a person's hand touches mashkin, so then that hand becomes tameh midrabanan, sheni l'tumah. Or there's another gzeira that if a person touches sifrei HaKodesh, that your hand becomes sheni l'tumah. So what did it say in the Mishnah? That regarding trumah, if one hand became tameh, so then the other hand is not tameh. Whereas when it comes to kachim, if one hand of the person is tameh and you touch the other hand, so then the other hand becomes tameh as well. Okay, the Gemara will explain exactly what this Mishnah was speaking about. In what case? When does the other hand become tameh? Rav Shezvi explained in what case the Mishnah was speaking about. Bechiburin shanu. We're speaking about in a case where they're attached to each other. What does this mean, they're attached to each other? So we were talking here regarding trumah or regarding kachim. So Rashi's pshat in the Gemara is that a person had one hand that became tameh, and then there's another hand that did not become tameh. The other hand is still toir, but in the hand that's toir, he's holding kachim. And then the hand that's tameh touches the hand which is tameh, again, that's toir, that's holding kachim. So then we say that regarding kachim, we're going to be machmer and say that the kachim is going to become tameh because on the hand that's tameh touch the hand that's toir, then the hand that's toir is touching kachim, that the kachim will become tameh. But b'negei to trumah, we're not going to say that. B'negei to trumah, one hand is tameh, the other hand is toir. Even if you're touching the hand that's toir, which is holding trumah, the trumah is not going to be tameh. That's what the Mishnah is speaking about. B'chiburin. That's Rashi's pshat in the Gemara. Tosfos says a little bit of a different pshat, that it's speaking sort of in the reverse, that the hand which is tamei is still touching the tamei item that made this hand tamei, and then with your tired hand holding truma, you touch the tamei hand that's still touching this item which is tamei. Okay? Well, let's go with Rashi's pshat, that it's bichiburin means that your hand which is tamei is not anymore touching what is tamei, but it's tamei now, and now it touches the hand which is tired while it's still holding the kachim or the truma inside. So regarding kachim, we say that the kachim will become tamei. Regarding truma, not. These are all gzeiris midrabanan. Just the next shtickle over here in the Gemara, we're going to be talking about different halachas of tumah and tara, and most of these things are all different chumris and gzeiris that Chachamim made. Avol shaloi b'chiburin. But if the hands are not connected to one another, meaning, or not, it's not really connected. The point is not the hands being connected. If when the tamei hand touches the Chagigah hand, the Chagigah hand is not holding the kachim or the truma in it, it's b'shaloi b'chiburin. So meaning what happened is that the person touched his hand, the tamei hand, touched the Chagigah hand, when it was not holding kachim, it was not holding truma. And then afterwards he picked up kachim, or he picked up truma. So then, then there won't be a chumrah by kachim to say that the kachim will become tamei through this. What's the reason for this? So Rashi's pshat over here is, Rashi explains that the chumrah by kachim was that when you touch with your tamei hand, your tire hand, which is holding kachim, you may come to touch directly the kachim itself, or the truma itself, which is in the other hand. So regarding truma, they're not guys at that. They're not guys that you might come to touch the truma itself. But regarding kachim, we're afraid that since you're still holding kachim in your hand and you're touching your other hand, you might come to touch directly the kachim and make it tamei. So this hand, again, the first hand that's tamei, what level of tumah is it? It's a sheni l'tumah. When you touch your other hand, so the other hand becomes tamei, and it makes the kachim in the hand tamei as well. Why? Because we're afraid that you might touch the kachim directly. But if it's not bichiburin, then we're not guys at that. Because when I'm touching the other hand, the kachim is not in my hand yet. Later I go and pick up the kachim.
This is a sheni.
Correct.
And the next hand is a shlishi.
No. Let's see. So now, what level of tumah the second hand becomes? The Gemara is going to discuss right now. 1 second. That's not so pashut. What level of here's a brayse about that. Let's see. Eisvei Abaye. So Abaye asks on this pshat of Rav Sheizvei. So the brayse says as follows. And here the brayse specifies more b'negei to what the Mishnah said. A few details about this gzeira that they made by kachim, that one hand will make the other hand tamei, and the kachim in that other hand will become tamei. And there's a machlokes here. So the brayse says yad neguva. You have a hand that's dry. Metame chaverta. So the first hand will make the second hand tamei, letame lekodesh, and then the kachim that's in the toy in the second hand will become tamei. Avaloi letruma, but you don't make this chumrah regarding truma. This is the point that it said in the Mishnah. But now the detail that's added in the brayse here is yad neguva, that we're talking about a dry hand. What's the difference between a dry hand and a not dry hand? So that goes back to the point that I mentioned before. A dry hand is a sheni l'tumah. That's the gzeira of tumah midrabanan on the hand. What's with a hand which is wet? If it's wet, so then the moisture on the hand is a rishon l'tumah. Mashkin the wagayz, it should become a rishon l'tumah. So it's saying over here, we're talking about a dry hand, which is a sheni l'tumah. That sheni l'tumah will make the second hand tamei, and will make the kachim tamei as well. Now, what level of tumah is the kachim going to become from this hand? So what this divrei Rebbe, this is Rebbe's opinion. What Rebbe is saying is as follows. Rebbe says the first hand is a sheni l'tumah. You touch the second hand will become a sheni l'tumah as well. Same level of tumah. That was the gzeir of Chazal. Even though it should go a level down, it should be a shlishi. No, the second hand will become a sheni l'tumah, and then the kachim in his hand will become a shlishi l'tumah. If the kachim becomes a shlishi, so then the kachim is tamei itself, and it could still be metameh something else, other kachim, to become a revi. That's what Rabbi says. Rabbi Yosef bar Rabbi Yehuda says, "Lift soil avaloi l'tamei." That the first hand is a sheni, you touch the second hand will become a shlishi, then the kachim, which is in your hand, will become a revi. So it's going to be pasul, which pasul always means that it's tamei itself, avaloi l'tamei. But the kachim in your hand is not going to be tamei in a level that it can make something else tamei. Okay, so this is basically the machlokes regarding the pshat on our Mishnah. This chumrah that our Mishnah said regarding kodesh, that one hand will make the other hand tamei, does it mean that the other hand becomes tamei on the same level as the first hand? Or does it mean that the other hand becomes tamei a level lower, only a shlishi l'tumah? Ataisis here points out an important thing. If the point is that the sheni l'tumah of the first hand makes the second hand only a shlish l'tumah, which is a level lower, so then what's the chiddush? We're saying that this is a special chumrah for kachim. What would be the chiddush? Obviously, one hand touches the other. Shouldn't it make it a shlish l'tumah? So Taisa says no, that is a chiddush because this whole tumah of the first hand, which is a sheni l'tumah, is exerim d'Rabbanan, and without this chumrah by kachim, the hand which is a sheni that touches the other hand does not transmit tumah at all. By truma, by other things, by chulin, the tumah of one hand does not transmit any tumah to the other hand. But over here, regarding kachim, it does. But the machlokes is, to what level? Rabbi says that one hand makes the other hand the same, also a sheni, and Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda says that the sheni of the first hand will make the second hand only a shlishi.
So only by truma and kachim we find that parts of the body come tummy.
Lav dafka. Even by chulin as well, I think even by chulin as well. Elamai, over here, by kachim, the chiddush is that one hand could make the other hand tameh. But this chumrah, that one hand could become tameh, is a gzeira of tumah midrabbanan that applies even to chulin as well. Okay, now the Gemara is going to focus on the word neguva. What did it say over here? That we're talking specifically about a dry hand. And that's why the Rebbe was coming and telling you that this dry hand, that's a sheni l'tumah, makes the other hand tameh. So the Gemara now, if the case that we're speaking about over here is that the first hand, which is tameh, touches the second hand, which is not tameh, and it's shaloi b'chiburin, he's not yet holding the kachim in the second hand. Hainu rabusei de neguva. So that's the chiddush over here regarding the dry hand. That even though his hand is dry, and you would expect that this hand which is dry and it's a sheni l'tumah should make the next hand only a shlishi l'tumah, but nevertheless the chiddush is that it also becomes a sheni l'tumah. That's the chiddush. What's the chiddush over here? If the hand would have been wet, so then the first hand is considered to be a rishon l'tumah because of the wetness. So then obviously when you touch the next hand, it becomes a sheni l'tumah because of the mashkin, that's a rishon. But the chiddush here is that you have the hand which is dry and it's only a sheni l'tumah. It should make the other hand a shlishi, but nevertheless it makes it a sheni. So that's, if it's shaloi b'chiburim, we can understand what the chiddush of what that Rebbe was saying here is. Ele yamret b'chiburin. But if you're going to say, like Rav Shezvi said, that what's the pshat in our Mishnah? When the first hand touches the second hand, he's holding already the kachim in the second hand. And what was the pshat? What are we concerned about? We're concerned that just like the first hand is touching the second hand, because it's already holding kachim in that second hand, you might come to touch directly the kachim that's in the second hand. So if so, that the Mishnah is only speaking about if he's actually already holding kachim in his hand. What is the chiddush over here regarding a dry hand? What is our concern? Our concern is that this hand, which is the sheni l'tumah, may come to touch directly the kachim, and therefore make the kachim a shlishi l'tumah. So what are you being mechadish to me? That when the first hand touches the second hand also becomes a sheni, and now the second hand will make the kachim that he's holding a shlishi. That's pashit. That's the whole gzeira. Whether the hand is dry, whether the hand is not dry, the gzeira is that your hand, which is a sheni, might touch the kachim directly without touching the hand which is holding the kachim. That's the whole gzeira, that your hand, which is a sheni, is going to touch the kachim directly and make it a shlishi. It makes no difference then if your hand is dry or if your hand is not dry. The kachim is for sure going to become a shlishi, which is a level of at least a shlishi, which is a level of tumah that it could then make it a v. Right, the whole chiddush of Rebbe was that the first hand makes the kachim tameh in a level that not only it's going to be a revi, but it's going to be a shlishi. Right? Why? Because the point is that it's not only the first hand touching the second hand, and then the second hand transmits the tumah to the kachim. The concern is that you might touch the kachim directly. If that's the concern, that you're going to touch the kachim directly, so then for sure the kachim is becoming a shlishi. What's the difference if it's dry or if it's wet? It's going to be for sure on the level of a tumah that it can be metama something else. That's it. That's the Gemara's question, and the Gemara does not answer this question. Okay, but not
meaning that if it doesn't become a sheni, it becomes a shlishi.
Right. Again, means that if the second hand is not holding kachim in its hand, the tumah is not transmitted at all. That's what shalei b'chiburin loy means. There's no tumah at all. Okay, the Gemara now brings another machlokes here. Itmer nami. In our Gemara it says the word nami, but the Rishonim take out the word nami because it's not clear exactly what's the connection to what it said before. So Itmer, we learned, Omer Reish Lakish said, this Gzeira that it said in the Mishnah, that one hand makes another hand Tomei, Lo Shanu Elo Yodai. This is only regarding your hand, that the first hand of the person will make his other hand Tomei, if it touches it. Avoyat Chaveirei Loi. But if one of your hands becomes Tomei, and then you touch your friend's hand, it's not going to transmit Tomei to the friend's hand. Rabbi Yochanan says the chumrah of our Mishnah regarding kachim, that one hand makes another hand tomei, echad yadav echad yad chaverei. It's your hand, your friend's hand, doesn't make a difference. It transmits tomei even to your friend's hand. And then he adds another detail, ba'oisa hayad lifsel, that the chiddush over here, that one hand that touches the second hand, that it makes it tomei, it's only lifsel, avaloy l'tamei, meaning that the second hand becomes a shlishi l'tumah. And then the Kodesh will become a Revi L'tumah. But not that the first hand will make the second hand a Sheni L'tumah like it, and then it'll make the Truma a Shlishi L'tumah, which is Tomei to make something else Tomei. It'll only make the second hand a Shlishi L'tumah to make the Kachim a Revi L'tumah. Okay, but the main Chiddush over here of Rabbi Yochanan was that even if you touch your friend's hand, it'll also make his hand Tomei. Mimai, so he says, what's my source? Mediktani Seifa, because it says in the Seifa of the Mishnah, Shayad metame chaverta l'kodesh. The Mishnah says that one hand will make another hand tomei for kodesh. Avalei l'truma, but that chumrah does not apply to truma. So the question is, Hasu lamali. Why does the Mishnah repeat this again? Hatana le reisha. It already said this in the reisha. If you look in the lashon of the Mishnah Mamish says the same halacha twice. The Mishnah says that im nitmis achas miyadav chaverta tahira ubekaidesh mat pilshteyan. And then it says again in the Mishnah, shahayat mitames chaverta bekaidesh avaloi betruma. So why does the Mishnah repeat the same halacha twice? That's the question of Rabbi Yochanan. So the answer is, elolav shmamin ol nasuy yat chavera. It's coming the first time the Mishnah is saying that one hand of the person makes his other hand tomei, and then it says even if that one hand which is tomei touches the hand of your friend's hand, it also makes it tomei. And the Gemara says, Rish Lakish also retracted from his opinion. He agreed to Rabbi Yochanan, Omer Rabbi Yena, Omer Rav Ami, Omer Rish Lakish, Echad Yadav Echad Yad Chaveiroi, whether it's your hand, whether it's your friend's hand, if the hand which is Tomei touches another hand, it makes it Tomei. That's the Chumrah by Kodesh. And by Yad, now this is referring only to the first hand that became Tomei. Right? This was also the pshat before. I didn't specify before. When it says here ba'oisa yad, what it means is that when we're saying that your hand that touches your friend's hand, it makes your friend's hand tamei, that's only if that first original hand that became tamei touches your friend's hand. What happens if one hand touches a second hand, and now the second hand touches your friend's hand? It's not going to make it tamei. Ba'oisa yad, the first hand, and liv soil avalei tamei. Your hand that touches your friend's hand. Your hand is a sheni l'tumah. It'll make your friend's hand a shlishi l'tumah, and the kachim will become a revi l'tumah. Okay, now the Gemara will bring over here that this concept is a machlekes. V'liv soil avolei l'tameh. This point that we just said, that when your hand touches your other hand, or it touches your friend's hand, it only makes the second hand a shlishi l'tumah, and therefore the kachim will only be a revi l'tumah, which is what v'liv soil means. The tumah doesn't extend any further. Avaloi l'tameh, the first hand will not make the second hand a sheni l'tumah, so tanoihi. This is a machlokes tanoim. The Tanan, so first the Gemara will bring one Mishnah to try to prove that it's a machlokes tanoim, and then it brings another Mishnah. And so in one Mishnah we learned, so there's two halachas in this Mishnah. The first halacha is not relevant for what we're speaking about, but the first halacha there is, kol ha'paisel b'tumah, any level of tumah that makes pasul by truma. What level of truma is this? Sheni l'tumah. A sheni l'tumah will make the next item that touches it pasul, which means that it itself will be tamei. That's a shlishi l'tumah. So metame yedayim liyos shniyos. This level of tumah, this sheni l'tumah, if it touches a person's hand, there's a chumrah that the hand will become not a shlishi l'tumah, but the hand will become a sheni l'tumah, like the level of tumah that touched it. That's the first halacha. And then the other halacha, now this has been negayah to kachim, and this is the halacha that we're speaking about over here. V'yad mitame chaverta. One hand makes the other hand tamei. Divrei Rabbi Yeshua. This is what Rabbi Yeshua is saying. And now the point, the chiddush of Rabbi Yeshua is that when one hand makes the other hand tamei, it makes it tamei on the same level, also a sheni. The Chachamim say, Yadayim shniyasein. The hand of a person is only a sheni l'tumah. Ve'ein sheni, yis a sheni. if the first hand is a sheni, it touches the second hand. Even by kachim, where there's a chumrah that the second hand becomes tamei, but it will not make it a sheni, it'll only make it a shlishi. So my love, don't you think, what are the chachamim saying? Sheni yud lo yavid. The first hand will not make the second hand a sheni, but hashlishi yavid. The first hand will make the second hand a shlishi. So here, we see this machlokes between Rabbi Shua and the Chachamim. When the first hand makes the second hand tamei, it doesn't mean that the second hand becomes a sheni, like the first hand, and therefore the kachim in the hand will then become a shlishi. Or no, the second hand becomes a shlishi, and then the kachim will only be a revi. That's the point about whether it's paisel or it's metame. So the Gemara says no. Lav dafka. Maybe the Chachamim are actually saying that the second hand does not become tamei at all. Dilme, maybe loy sheni yavid v'loy shlishi. Chachamim disagree to this whole gzeira. They say that the second hand does not become not a sheni and not a shlishi at all. So from here we have no makkah at all. When Chachamim said the lashon yadayim shnius and ve'ein sheni oisa sheni, they meant to say that the sheni will not make a sheni and it will not make a shlishi either. It will not make the second hand tamei at all. Ella says the Gemara, and this is the brayso that we just quoted before. Kihani tanoi. We have over here this brayso that we quoted before, where we clearly see that there's a machlokes tanoim. What level of tumah does one hand transmit to the other hand? The Tanya, the brayso we quoted before, said Yad neguva. You have a dry hand, which is tamei. So metames chaverta. So one hand will make the other hand tamei litamei bakodesh. That now the kachim that you're holding becomes tamei. Tamei means that it's going to be a shlishi l'tumah, that it could still make something else tamei. Avaloy l'truma. By truma we don't have this gzeira. Divrei Rabbi. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda says oisa yad lifsail. First hand will make the second hand puzzle, meaning that the second hand will become a shlishi l'tumah, which will then make the kachim a revi l'tumah. Avaloy l'tamei. But it's not going to make the kachim a shlishi l'tumah. That's the brayso we quoted before. So you clearly see that this is a machlokes. What level of tumah the first hand transmits to the second hand. Okay, the next, one of the other things it said in the Mishnah regarding the chumrah of kachim, oichlim neguvim biyadayim misuavis. That when it comes to a person is eating food, and the food is dry, you can eat that food even of trumah with your hands. What's a person's hands? A person's hands stam. If you don't wash your hands, is a sheni l'tumah. And you're eating food which is dry. Truma, that is. You can eat truma which is dry. But kachim, you can't eat it even if it's dry. And now what's this point of the food being dry? So we learned about this a few times before, that when it comes to food, the only way it becomes susceptible to tumah, which is what's called mukhshel kabel tumah, is if it came in contact with liquids. If it did not come in contact with liquids, it's not susceptible to be makabel tumah. So therefore by truma, you don't want to make the truma tamei either. You're not allowed to eat a truma which is tamei. But even though your hand is a sheni l'tumah, and usually a sheni makes a shlishi, but as long as the food is dry, you can eat it. It's not going to make it tamei. But by kachim, they were machber and said, even if it's dry, you can't eat it. So now the Gemara asks on this. The Gemara is actually going to say that this halacha b'negeh to kachim is not even a chiddush. We know this from another place. Tanya, Amar Rab Chanina ben Antignes. Rab Chanina ben Antignes said, "V'chi yesh neguva l'kodesh." This whole concept that we make a distinction, whether the food is dry, whether the food is wet. When it comes to kachim, is there a distinction? But we know that there's the following halacha, chibas hakodesh machshartam. We already learned out from a different place that when it comes to kachim, because of the chibas hakodesh, the literal translation of chibas hakodesh is the specialty, the uniqueness of kachim. Because kachim is on a higher level, so there's a special gzeira of Chazal that even without coming in contact with any liquid, automatically it's susceptible to tumah. So that's something that we know already from other places, that by kachim it doesn't need to become wet in order to be susceptible to tumah. So is that the din that our Mishnah here is speaking about? We know that halacha already. So what's the chiddush of our Mishnah that when you're eating dry foods by kachim with your hands which are sheni l'tumah, that it's going to make the kachim tamei? So the Gemara says, Loit tzriche, the case over here is a little bit different. No, over here we're not talking about a person that's touching directly the kachim with his dry hands. That's for sure going to make it tamei, because his hand is a sheni l'tumah, and you don't need any liquids to make it tamei. But what's the case here? Kagain shetochav loy chaveiroi. Someone put into your mouth the kachim without touching it. How l'teichpiv into your mouth? So you did. Let's say your friend washed his hands. So your friend's hands are not sheni l'tumah. Your friend put kachim into your mouth. Or you placed kachim into your mouth. How? B'koish u'b'charcher, which are different types of utensils that are used for weaving. So the point is, or maybe even a fork, or maybe, I don't know, maybe the Gemara uses toothpick or a stick. Okay, no, he didn't he's not touching the food itself with his hands, which are sheni l'tumah. And he placed it into his mouth. So if he would be holding this kachim in his hand is a sheni l'tumah, he would make the kachim a shlishi l'tumah, even though it's not wet. So he put it into his mouth without touching it. So that's not a problem. But now, so he wants to also eat an onion or a radish together with this kachim that he's eating. And he's going to touch with his hands this radish or this onion and place it into his mouth. So this onion and this radish, he's holding in his hands, which are sheni l'tumah, and putting it into his mouth. So l'kaidesh, regarding kachim, eating kachim and chulin together, and putting chulin food into your mouth with your hands that are sheni l'tumah, so l'kaidesh gazribu rabbana. So regarding kachim, chachamim were geyser that you might end up touching with your hands, you might end up touching the kachim which is in your mouth. So if a person is eating first kachim and then he wants to add chulin food in his mouth, we're afraid he's going to end up touching with his hands the kachim. So therefore they said you're not allowed to do this. But l'trumah legazribu rabbanan. Regarding trumah, the chachamim were not geyser. So Rashi adds a detail to explain this over here, that we're talking specifically, like it said over here in the Mishnah, we're talking specifically about the food that he's placing into his mouth, which is dry. Why are we talking dafka about the chulin food now? According to this pshat that the Gemara is saying here, the chulin food that he's placing into his mouth is dry. Because if this chulin would be wet with mashkin, if it would actually be wet now, in other words, not only that it once became wet, and therefore it became susceptible to tumah, that is, but it's now wet. What's the halacha with mashkin? By mashkin, chachamim were geyser that it becomes a rishon l'tumah. So if the mashkin would be a rishon l'tumah, by placing the chulin in his mouth, it would automatically make the kachim in his mouth tameh. So what we're talking about is that the chulin is dry. His hands are sheni l'tumah. A sheni l'tumah that touches chulin does not make the chulin tameh. There's no shlish l'tumah for the chulin. So when he places the food in his mouth, technically there should be no problem. The kachim in his mouth he never touched. The chulin he's touching, but it doesn't make the chulin tameh. Then he places it into his mouth, he can eat it together. But what we're afraid is that when he puts the food into his mouth, by kachim, we're afraid that with his tameh hand, the sheni l'tumah, he might touch the kachim as well. But for trumah, we're not geyser that. Okay, one more small piece. Let's finish off here to the Mishnah. It said in the Mishnah, ha'aynin u'mechusik yipurim. When it comes to a person which was an aynin or a mechusik yipurim, these are people that were not allowed to eat kachim. They already went to the mikveh. But nevertheless, after they bring their carbon, so in order to be allowed to eat kachim, they have to go to the mikveh yet again. But for trumah, they don't. They went to the mikveh the night before, that they could already eat the night before. Fragt the Gemara, my time, why should they have to go to the mikveh again? So the answer is, Kivin da'ada idne havo asiri, because until after they actually bring their carbon, there was also to eat kachim, or a person which is an aynan, he was also to eat kachim, atzachina rabbanan tvila. The rabbanan required him to tevel again. And the reason is, a person that knows that I'm in a status where I'm not allowed to eat kachim, he's not so careful to not become tameh. He might have been masiach das and he might have become tameh. So therefore, once he gets elevated to the status that he's allowed to eat kachim, he has to go to the mikveh again, because he might have forgotten and touched something which is tameh in that time period.